Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today at this PIBC-led webinar, which has a very focused title of How to Get a Job in Planning, which is a topic that we know is of great interest to students who are nearing completion of their degrees and getting ready to graduate. So for those of you who don't know me and I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Rylan Graham. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Planning and Sustainability at the University of Northern British Columbia. And I'll just acknowledge that I'm joining you from Prince George, which is on the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh. Um, Aside from my day job as an assistant professor, I'm also the chair of PIBC's Academic Sub-Liaison Committee, which, if you're unfamiliar with this committee, it's a group of student and faculty representatives from BC's four planning schools, so UBC, SFU, VIU, and UNBC. And as a group, we come together to work on initiatives of shared interest, in which we try to bridge the gap between planning scholarship, education, and planning practice. And so this webinar being one such example. I'm really pleased to be able to share and to say that we have an excellent group of panelists joining us for today's discussion. And that includes Lindsay Chase, who's the Director of Planning at the District of Saanich, Ashley Murphey, who's the General Manager of Development Services at Peace River Regional District, Sam Hadfield, proud UNBC alum and also a planning technician at the District of Oak Bay, Adam Mattinson of B&A Studios, and Oleg Verbenkov, who's the founder of Pacific Land Group. So together, these panelists represent experiences in different geographies, roles, and stages of their careers, and have important insights that relate to today's topic. And so leading us through the conversation today are Emma Laux, who's a student at UBC, and Anna Irwin Borg, who's a student at VIU. And so the way that this will operate and function today is that Emma and Anna have a series of questions for the panelists. And those questions were informed directly from all of you who took time to submit the questions in advance. So our many thanks and our gratitude to those of you who did so. There's also should be an opportunity available for you to submit any questions to the chat box. If there's time, we will try to get some of those as well, but keeping in mind we only have an hour today. So with that said, and without further delay, I will hand it off to Emma and Anna, who will lead us through the next hour.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryland. Yeah, I thought we could just start with a round of intros. Ryland already introduced us, so maybe we can just first go around and every panelist could say their name, their position, and briefly what you do in that position. Let's start with Sam.
Oh no. Yeah, I'm Sam Hadfield. He, him. I joined the District Oak Bay 9 months ago as a planning technician. Big news as of this morning. Very, very relevant to this webinar. I was selected as a successful candidate to be a development planner at the District Oak Bay. But point being, I went through this kind of same interview process 9 months ago, and then also just 2 weeks ago that every many of these attendees will be venturing upon in the coming weeks. But yeah, I'm coming to you from the traditional territory of the Algonquin speaking peoples, today known as the Songhees and Esquimalt Nations. In my current role, I kind of, at a high level, I essentially help people understand the municipal planning framework that kind of their projects and their ideas need to fit into. And then I also, help them guide them through that process, as well as provide advice to council on the applications in front of them. So compared to other panelists today, obviously my experience will be more in speaking to what's worked for me in the interviews I've had, how I managed to get that first position, which was through an internship. Spoiler alert. But yeah, in terms of just speaking briefly to my role and responsibilities there, like for me, there's like kind of big three like kind of groups of areas of responsibility. And so one is kind of this, file manager guiding applicants through their application processes, kind of acting as, kind of this, if there's kind of this communication funnel, there's a lot of reviews that need to happen at the district level. And then on the client side, there's a lot of consultants that they'll use on a project, to ensure that, things can move efficiently. It's I am the person that is communicating with, their head. And so, that looks like ensuring, reviews are happening at a reasonable pace, assuring that we're hitting, our key like legislated deadlines for public notices, et cetera, as well as report writing and ensuring we're getting those to council on a reasonable timeline. Um, Importantly, that can, also involve providing applicants with news that they might not like to hear in terms of requirements or in terms of, just, their applications conformance with the zoning bylaw, for example, in general. Um, Something that you might want to know if you're going to be a municipal planner is that, oftentimes you are having to say no more than you would like. And that's just a skill that you have to, you know, uh, pick up along the way if you don't already have it. Um, but two other areas are, just kind of fine-grained, bylaw and policy analysis, looking at, a project, taking it in, fully understanding it, and analyzing, even down to the nitty-gritty of does it meet this setback, or is their floor area right? Are they measuring to the correct, roof height, even things like that. Um, Policy-wise, one of the big learnings that you'll get in municipal planning is that things are not nearly as clear as you would expect them to be, and that essentially that is, I think one of the biggest learnings for me was that that's your job as the municipal planner. It's that's why you get paid actually is to help sort through that, and so kind of being able to kind of embrace that uncertainty, look for context elsewhere in a policy document, and try to gauge the intent, and then come up with a professional opinion on how that should apply in a certain case. That's a big um, yeah, skill that you'll need to apply in these kinds of positions. And then finally, one of the most kind of rewarding parts for me is just I get to interface with the public a lot. And so in my role as a planning technician, I'm essentially that front line in terms of, you have a question or you have an idea or a project, you're a developer or the public, and what municipal processes would even apply, and what would that look like? Is it a no-go from the start, or would there be council approvals required, that sort of thing. um, I feel like we've built up these really complex municipal processes to deal with a lot of uncertainty and side effects, and um, we've created a very complex system that for the average person can be really hard to work through. So being able to kind of break those down and make that system more accessible is something that gives me a lot of satisfaction. But yeah, I think I'll leave her there. Those are the big kind of three pieces of my role.
Great. Can you pass it off to the next person?
Yeah, Adam, you're the only one that shows up on my screen, so unfortunately it'll have to be you.
Thanks so much, Simon. Congrats on the promotion. Big news. So good timing. Adam Mattinson from B&A Studios. I go by he, him pronouns, and I'm coming to you from Vancouver, so the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. I am the head of our West Coast planning arm. For those of you that don't know B&A Studios, we are a private sector planning, design, and engagement focused firm, largely based out of Alberta. I was retained by the firm about 3.5 years ago to help expand into BC, where I'm originally from. I have worked in BC and also did a big stint out in Ontario as well, where I went and did my master's at that way. And we were recently acquired by SEMA Plus, so we are now a full service engineering firm. My day to day, I run our urban planning focus, which the BC office that I lead, our team here is primarily focused on more municipal focus policy development and support. So while we are a private sector firm, a lot of our focus is for, I'd say about 95% public sector entities, governments, not-for-profits, regional and local governments, and occasionally the province itself. And the various ministries. We provide a high level focus on understanding land economics, economic development, and the integration of demographics, socioeconomic factors, and how they all work their way through policy to land use and basically housing and jobs. So I like to simplify. It's a lot of planning by Excel at the end of the day, but of course, it's understanding the stories that go behind these numbers and translating them into effective policy. I will happily hand it off to, I think Ashley's next on the list here.
Thanks. Good to see everyone. My name's Ashley Murphy. I am the General Manager of Development Services for the Peace River Regional District, so largest regional district in the province, covering about 120,000 square kilometers of the province of BC. So Treaty 8 territory. And my role is principally to oversee the planning, building, and bylaw enforcement teams here at the regional district. Um, so yeah, a little bit of everything. And then I also deal with a sprinkling of economic development and tourism, and some other random things that don't really have their own home with other departments here at the regional district. So quite a diverse range, but yeah, I get to work on lots of cool things. We have a great small team, so it means it's all hands on deck. So it's always something new and exciting. And I will pass it off to Oleg.
Well, thanks. Oleg Verbenkov. I'm with Pacific Land Group, and I'm a founding principal that started the firm about 26 years ago. I'm also a senior planner and a project manager. We do a lot of land use studies. We do a lot of private development work. We do work with developers. We work with pension funds. We work with, actually, we do work for local government as well. So when they're either acquiring or disposing of property, we do a lot of assessments for the realty divisions, and as a sort of a third party, deal with their own planning departments to ensure that they get the best value for the properties that they're either buying or selling. We do a lot of project management, so we're working with a lot of different disciplines, so surveyors, arborists, landscape architects, hydrogeologists, geotechnical engineers, civil engineers, and so on and so forth. So we also do appraisal and legal support. So we're expert witnesses. So in front of the Supreme Court of British Columbia. I'll also do a lot of work with the Land Commission. So we're currently working with actually a couple of local governments that are dealing with issues related to right-of-ways through the land reserve. In one case, we're working with local government that's excluding some land, but also putting some land in. So for park purposes, do a lot of non-farm use type applications, and so on. So mostly, I would say probably 65, 70% private work, and then the rest is for public sector. So who's next? Is it Lindsay?
I think I am. Yes, thanks, Oleg. Hello, I'm Lindsay Chase. I'm the Director of Planning for the District of Saanich on southern Vancouver Island. In my role, I oversee a team of just over 40 planners, technicians, subdivision approving officers, and admin folk, dealing with both current and long-range planning for the District of Saanich. So Saanich is the largest municipality on Vancouver Island, roughly an equal land base between rural and suburban/urban, and very much a community in transition right now. So lots of really interesting conversations about densification and neighborhood character. Beyond that, I've been teaching at Vancouver Island University for the past 10 years, served on PIBC board, I've served on CIP, the Planning Standards Board, and I'm currently on the Professional Practice Review Committee for PIBC. So lots of diverse experience, and it feels like I've been doing nothing but hiring people for the past 3 years. So lots of experience on the other side of the table from those of you who are interested in a career in local government, and I certainly have some thoughts on how to best present yourself, both through your resume and cover letter, but then also in your interview as well. So looking forward to some great conversation today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. So, for our first question, we are wondering, kind of thinking throughout your career, were there any particularly unique or unexpected ways that you were able to get a job in this field?
Well, I can start if you want. My case is probably a little bit different than what things are like today because I started um, over 4 decades ago. At that time, I started at the city of Surrey, and I came in just after they had a big municipal strike, so there were a lot of people had left. So in some ways, I guess I got lucky. And I think the joke was the director used to joke and say that the reason we hired Oleg is because he looked at a house once. So, um, you know, uh, obviously I had a resume. Obviously, I had, background in urban geography and so on and so forth. But I would say probably today, if I didn't know somebody who could recommend me, I probably wouldn't have gotten that job. So.
Great. Does anyone else have any other? Yeah.
I'm happy to jump in here. I think also following Oleg, mine is probably a little bit non-traditional, and also recognizing context similar for me. I started coming out of my master's program in 2015 when the market was pretty good, but we've always heard from folks that came before us, and I think we're seeing this now that the market does go through different fluctuations in terms of hiring and kind of tightening of budgets. In my case, I didn't know about planning as a vocation until I was done my undergrad in political science at UBC. So I only found out in one of my master's at Ryerson, back when it was Ryerson, now TMU. But I had worked for the city of Coquitlam as a vegetation control officer, the guys that you see whacking weeds in the summer as a public works job as an internship. But I managed to work my way up through the city hall. It was the first male building permit clerk in the city's history, and eventually joined their planning department while going to school. But when I was there, actually, at the same time when I was doing my master's, I ended up TAing for one of the adjunct professors at the school there, who ran a boutique firm called Hempson Consulting, focusing on demographic analysis and municipal finance. And so I guess I did a decent enough job at the time for that posting as his TA that they were so impressed, they asked me out for a beer and offered me a job. So I had job offers from both the city and from a private sector firm, and so I had a bit of a choice at that time, and I decided to go with the private sector side to see how the other side lived at that point. But definitely strongly about the connections you make on the way up is my story in terms of how I landed where I did.
I love hearing these stories. This is probably one of my favorite questions because it seems so many planners that I have been fortunate enough to speak with all have such varied ways that they've come into planning and various experiences. And for me, it was, very similar to Adam. I didn't know planning was a thing. I was actually about 2 years into my pre-med to become a dentist. And I ended up switching degrees. I was working at a real estate office part-time at the time. And so it just seemed to align kind of with some of the work that I was doing. But when I graduated from UNBC in 2013, the job market was pretty tight and there wasn't a lot of entry-level positions available. And most of the positions that were available wanted you to have around, 3 to 5 years of professional planning experience. So I actually went and ran heavy equipment and started working in mining and then working in oil and gas because obviously I had some student loans to pay off. So needed a job. But that unexpected kind of career path gave me a lot of invaluable experience because it helped me understand the resource sector quite well, which is a huge part of the bread and butter up here in our region. So it led me to understand that as well as the lay of the land, and I got to see some really cool remote areas. And it eventually led me into the permitting process. So I worked as they call them surface land agents, or so working kind of on the private sector side, applying to the province for various regulatory approvals. So that was a really great learning experience. And eventually a planning job did open up here in the Peace region. And thanks to kind of that understanding I had of the local area, the relevant economies, that led me well to be well positioned for the role in planning. And it's proven invaluable over my time here because, having that understanding is critical. We get a lot of referrals from various agencies related to different industrial development happening throughout the region. So it's provided a good basis for that work.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to move on to the next question now. So I'll pass it over to Emma with that one.
Yeah, I think just touching, related to the entry-level positions that require a lot of experience, there are a lot of questions from the registrants about that. So we're going to just ask, how do we as new grads get those entry-level positions with minimal experience that seem to require a lot of experience? What are alternative avenues that we might be able to explore to secure sort of entry-level work?
I'm happy to jump in on that one. So one of the things that we tend to look for in Saanich when we're reviewing resumes is that not necessarily that you actually have paid experience. It's that you've been out there doing things in the community. I also can't say enough about our team members who have come up from some of the service sector jobs. So if you have experience as a server in a restaurant, as a sales associate in wherever, I've found that those customer service skills that you've gained and those people skills actually really help you stand out in terms of your ability to answer questions, think on your feet, those types of things. So it's really a matter of translating those skills into what's going to be valuable in terms of the employer that I'm applying to. So if you're applying to a local government position, you want to highlight that you have those good customer service skills, those client relation skills, that ability to be responsive. And you probably also have some really great opportunities of conflict to draw on when you get to that interview stage, and it's about how did you resolve that conflict. So it's telling the stories of the actual skill that you have, not necessarily the role that you were engaged in at the time. So I love to see that those customer service oriented roles. The other thing that I love to look for is what kind of volunteer experience do you have? Are you out there in the community doing something interesting that is going to give you perhaps a different perspective on how systems work within the area or geography that you're interested in? So if you have experience working for a nonprofit that serves a vulnerable population, that's a really great thing to have on a resume. If you have experience on an advisory committee that serves the local government, so you've been appointed by council to an advisory design panel or a planning group, or you've participated as a member of a steering committee on a planning process, all of those are really great things to be highlighting and don't necessarily speak to your paid experience. I also acknowledge that in Saanich, at least, we've actually recently gone through and kind of rejigged some of our job descriptions, and we now have a planning analyst position that looks for no work experience. What we are looking for, though, is that you actually have a planning degree. So that is actually really important for us here, is that you actually have that accredited degree. And if you don't have that accredited degree, your competition is going to be pretty fierce because there are a lot of very hungry recent grads out there who are doing all the right things to get noticed. And then the last thing that I would say about that is don't underestimate the power of your network. So just like everybody else has already talked about, one of the really common threads through the response that everyone gave on that, how did you land your first job? They networked at some level. and they had somebody rooting for them, preferably on the inside, who's going to act as their champion to whoever is responsible for making decisions about shortlists. So a few pieces to consider.
I can definitely vouch for Lindsay's point about service. I have to say that probably my best transferable skill I had was working Black Fridays at Best Buy, and how that relates to experience running some rather tenuous or fraught public hearings sometimes. So crowd control. I think building on everything that Lindsay said, really, planning is a very wide field, but there's a lot of ways to distinguish yourself, whether it's public engagement support, whether it's technical analysis, whether it's transportation planning, housing. There's so many different areas, and depending on the posting, depending on the job that you're applying to, there are different ways you can tailor your response. And also, I mean, I recognize many folks in this discussion are maybe in their last few terms here, but how you take your electives coming through as well too. I focused a lot of mine personally on building our development viability and financials, and so understanding how to build a pro forma and how that translates to the impact of policy on development viability at the end of the day. And that's how I ended up where I did. Similarly, both myself and many folks I know that landed jobs were able to, if your program offers client-based studio projects, those effectively function very much like work experience, especially when you're coming from a consulting background. Very similar. You have a client, you have a project, you're working on it for 4 months, and you're trying to find a solution. Highlight those projects if you're working on them. They are a very good experience to leverage.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I've had people that come joined us over the years where they have done some work. In fact, are able to actually put together a proposal. I've had, I think, a couple of people that we've hired that have helped me put together a proposal, and we got the job, and that started their planning career as well. I also I try to get out to events, whether it's Chamber of Commerce or other industry associations, whether it's PIBC evening and so on, and I tend to meet young people that are just finishing their degrees or what have you. And then that leads to, I guess, some further connection where then I have a sense of who they are, and they have a sense of, what we do. And that, sometimes leads to either some summer work or permanent work if the fit is good. I guess I would suggest for the kinds of things that we do, we look for people who understand what the various planning hierarchy is in terms of whether it's the regional plan, the official community plans, zoning, local area plans, that sort of thing, that have an understanding for those things and can sort of find their way around on a local government website, for example, some of the mapping systems, and understanding what there's such things as water courses and other things that influence what you can do with a piece of property. Just if you have those kinds of concepts, or you understand that they exist, is a good start as far as I'm concerned.
Great, thank you. That was all really, really excellent advice. So maybe just to follow up with a quick question around the value in sort of furthering your education in planning versus getting like practical, or I guess like professional experience. I know that, Lindsay, you said it's important to have an accredited degree, but is there value in having 2 accredited degrees, or would you prefer
No.
that someone go back and get, okay.
This is probably a counterintuitive response, but the reality is the undergrad and the master's accredited programs are all accredited on the exact same basis. So really, like, the master's degree in a second degree in planning is probably not your best bet. If you want a second degree master's level, because you acknowledge or recognize that you longer term will be competing against people with a master's degree, I would encourage you to go and get a master's degree in something like public admin or business admin as an alternative that also kind of rounds you out a little bit more. And then I'm also seeing questions about Langara and the non-accredited program. So the reality for for the work that my team does is I have a very clear distinction between planner track and technician track. So while I might consider somebody from Langara with that degree, which is fantastic for a planning technician, and I would absolutely consider them for that role, I would probably not consider somebody from Langara for a planning analyst or planner role just because you don't have the same education that somebody graduating from an accredited program does. So that's also where reading the job descriptions really carefully pays off. So if you have that diploma from Langara, super valuable. However, it is, I think, longer term going to limit you in terms of the types of opportunities that you find available to you. And that might not hold true everywhere, but it does hold true in the local government world that I've worked in for the past 26 years. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Did anyone else have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I'll just provide the alternative to Lindsay's point because I've definitely hired people that don't even have planning degrees. So I've hired someone with a community health degree before, someone with an environmental degree before. So we're a little bit more flexible here. I think it's for us, looking at kind of your background, what interests you in planning. Some of them have further goals to get a master's in planning eventually, but a master's definitely isn't something that we require up here. It's a nice to have for sure, or a master's of some format, but a lot of what we focus on is kind of that experience piece. So again, highlighting those customer service skills is critical in a lot of the work that we do, a lot of public facing work. And so I think I just wanted to note too from the previous question is even if you don't get a job right away after graduation, don't be discouraged. Don't give up. Keep applying. Take the opportunities as, maybe far-stretched as they may seem at the time, and you're not really sure how this is going to translate into experience or further your planning career. You never know where some opportunities may take you, and being willing to maybe take a leap of faith too, to move to a smaller or remote community. There's a lot of opportunity out there if you're willing to take kind of that leap, and you tend to get to work in have more access to different files and policy work and stuff because they tend to be smaller teams. So it can be a good opportunity to get a lot of experience in a short amount of time as well. But again, yeah, to Lindsay's point, like it's important that you read the job descriptions and make sure that you're highlighting kind of how your skill set, your background, your education is meeting those qualifications or those desired skill sets that are outlined therein. There's nothing more frustrating than getting a resume and cover letter that has the wrong community name on it or has things that are not relevant at all to the position. So make sure you're being really careful when you're doing your cover letter and resume.
And I would add to that do some research in whether it's a local government you're applying to or a private firm like ours. We have a pretty extensive website. Go through it, try to understand what these people do and why they do it, and who their client base might be. And that applies, like for example, when Ashley says she's in a remote community, you need to understand what that means and what that means from a resource perspective, as opposed to an urban transit perspective, right? So, I would strongly recommend that people get a better understanding of who they're applying to and why.
The one other thing that I want to add is in Saanich, because we're a very large employer on the South Island, we get hundreds of applications when we post a job. So you really need to stand out. And some of that standing out is going to be your qualifications. Some of that other standing out is going to be how well-rounded you are, how well-written your cover letter is, and then also what other experience do you bring to the role. So if you are a brand new grad and you are targeting like the larger major employers in the big regions, just be aware that you're going to have a lot more competition for those jobs, and that we really do have our choice of really exceptional candidates. What that means for you is you might need to take a look at some of the more remote areas. Like Ashley, I have followed the piece for a long time, and I've noted that you guys have had a fairly steady series of postings over time. That might be a great opportunity to actually get your foot into the planning door, gain some incredibly valuable experience that you're then able to take after the sort of critical 2 to 4 years, and apply for a much more senior position in a larger place. So that experience that you can gain in smaller communities, and that this was my pathway. Like I took a job in the regional district of Nanaimo. I actually took a temporary position as my first gig out of planning school, even though I had permanent job offers from other places. But it was the work that was really interesting. And that 2 years of experience at the RDN then was counted as 7 years of experience by the time I was applying for my first planner job at the City of Victoria, because the experience was so diverse, and absolutely, like, I had great stories to tell in the job interview about the craziness that we were dealing with through that particular role. First time I've ever had to have police protection at a public hearing was working in the regional district of Nanaimo. So like those are the types of things, though, that make you really memorable, and that experience can't be beat. The smaller the place, the broader the experience you're going to get. And I can't say enough about those first jobs in a small place being incredibly valuable for how much breadth you're able to gain.
I think actually it's funny, Lindsay, that you mentioned the 2 to 7 ratio, because I was actually told the exact same thing when I was coming up. Again, I was working for the city of Coquitlam, and had a track that I was going to be offered a job at the end of school, and I had a manager who'd come from the private side and said the basically same thing. He says, I recognize the track that you want to go on, and this might not be the same for everyone, but if you do want to take on a bit more of a management role or get your hands dirty with a couple different types of work, some of the best planners I've met and the most accomplished folks are the ones that were able to take on a role early in their career where they were wearing many different hats. If you're in one of those smaller communities, you're the development planner, you're the community planner. Sometimes you're handling bylaws. There's so many different things you get asked to do. Sometimes you're stepping in as a CAO, depending on who's available for that meeting accounts or whatever. You're just effectively having to do so many different things. Same thing goes with private side, though, too. That's part of the reason I made the decision I did going to Hempson, which was a boutique firm at the time. It was a team of 4, but the pitch I received was that if you're going into a bigger organization, it might take you 7 years to work up to a management role, and you might get very limited experience in a specific tract. Whereas if you go to some of these other positions, you're going to have, in 2 years' time, you're going to be running projects. You're going to be getting exposed to many different types of clientele and challenges. And that really does travel far if you want to make the jump to a different opportunity, moving laterally far sooner than you might otherwise get as well.
And if you're having ChatGPT write your letter after it's analyzed the website, be careful, because sometimes there's 3 or 4 applicant letters that are very, very identical.
Yeah, they're easy to spot.
I'll echo that ChatGPT warning there. Though I will encourage you to use ChatGPT or AI to practice your interview skills, frankly. So many of these, in terms of standing out in an interview, at least on the municipal side, in my experience, like these are fairly predictable interviews for the most part. There are behavioral questions, there are some technical questions, and the behavioral questions generally kind of fall under the same 8 kind of core concepts. You can expect a question about de-escalation, or about conflict in the workplace, about time management, these sorts of things. And because of that predictability, you really do have the opportunity to completely nail your star responses down in advance, and run those either by another person or I in this kind of most recent round, I was crafting these and submitting these to ChatGPT to say, what is that tone? Like, how am I coming across? And it was able to give me suggestions like, hey, you're actually not using person forward language in terms of like it's not actually clear what your contribution to this was. I would recommend uh, changing that. So I definitely highly recommend using it for editing. But when you receive a 3-page cover letter that I've seen that just kind of rambles and doesn't is very well written, but doesn't really get across a succinct point. Yeah, I do think the recruiters can tell. I just echo a lot of that kind of comments that I heard about working in northern rural communities and about like, not just the opportunities there and about kind of, it being a different, type of competition, but also about ensuring that when you're there, you're making it clear, why is it that you're applying to that community? Why is it that you can see yourself, staying and succeeding there? Yeah, I got the bulk of my experience at the start of my career at the city of Terrace in northern BC, and we receive applications where it just wasn't clear exactly why this person was interested in working at the city, frankly. Or like, they weren't able to um, communicate that through the interview process. You know, if your primary interest is in, urban planning and that's what you're communicating, and then you're working at, a town of 12,000, well, that just doesn't, you need to be able to, give them the confidence that you are going to be there, you're going to stay in that position for a reasonable amount of time, you're going to be fit, and you're going to have that you have some understanding of what that day-to-day experience of being in that role is going to be like, that you're not kind of dipping your toe, and they might need to find a new person in 1 to 2 months. Thanks.
That's great. That was all really good advice. Thank you so much.
Just to echo quickly on what Sam said, just a big what not to do. We had someone apply quite a few years ago, and in their cover letter, they referenced how excited they were to move to the coast and work on the ocean. And so, for those of you familiar with the Peace River Regional District, we are the northeast portion of BC. So, unfortunately, there is no coastline here, just the Peace River and some lakes. So, really important again that you're understanding that place so that as we're reviewing it, we have confidence that you know what you're potentially signing up for and the context of the area that you're planning on moving to potentially. So.
Yeah, great. So maybe we can just quickly sort of building off of that. And I do want to get to the question about international experience because that is coming up a lot. But if everyone could just or not everyone, but some people could just give one piece of advice for how to make your resume stand out, I feel like we are sort of seeing that, like make sure that you know your context, all those things. But if there's any sort of one thing that we should be focusing on.
I could go first. I think a lot of the traditional resume and cover letter tips for just general, professional life really apply just as strongly to planning. But I think the number one that I learned and probably the hard way after some, being sorted into the wrong pile probably a couple of times was when you're describing your role, well, or not tailoring your resume to the job. It doesn't take that long and improves your chances dramatically. But B, when you're describing the responsibilities or the things that you brought to that role, it not being quite clear how that is going to translate to success in this role. You use your person first language, describe, what you're able to accomplish and what that brought, to that employer.
Great.
Maybe perhaps provide some sense that you understand at least one or two details of what happens in the place that you're applying to. I'll give you an example. Like if you know that you're dealing with people who understand the the land reserve, maybe go look at a couple of decisions that have been made on whatever non-farm use exclusion, um, highway use permits, that sort of thing, and just try and get a sense that, or try and get across the sense that you understand what parameters are important.
Building on that as well too, if you're offered the opportunity as part of the application process to include a sample of work as well, if you have a portfolio, I find that makes folks stand out quite a bit if we can see the caliber of the work that they produce as well, even if it is a school project. Can give us a really good idea of how they are as a communicator, how they can present data or the story, in addition to the technical expertise as well. And that can be very valuable as along the way.
I'm going to say a really little detail, and that is figuring out who you're actually making the application to and putting their name on your cover letter so that you're actually addressing it to a person. When I see "Dear Hiring Manager," or worse, "Dear Sir," ooh, that suggests to me that you have not perhaps done too much research in advance of applying for that position. The other thing that I'm really looking for is, have you actually gone through our website and do you have an understanding of what some of the big projects we're working on are? And or if so that's super important for a community planning position, which could be doing the long range work or specific to housing. So what are some of the innovations that Saanich has done? And I realize Saanich and innovation in housing is not always words that you used to hear together, but that is changing. So what are some of the things that we're up to? What excites you about the approach that we have to planning? And why do you want to work with our team? Because it's a pretty darn awesome team, if I do say so myself. And then second to that is translating your experience from other roles, functions, opportunities into how this is actually going to be of benefit to your future employer. So like I talked about earlier, like those early customer service experience roles that you've had, how does that translate into you are somebody who can provide excellent customer service even under pressure and in the face of adversity and potentially yelling members of the community? Like those are the types of things that really help you stand out. And unfortunately, a ChatGPT generated or an AI generated cover letter is probably not going to do it, because I'm going to see anywhere from 5 to 15 of those. And if you can't write without ChatGPT helping you, I would be very concerned about your ability to function within the department, because writing is a really critical skill, and I want to be able to see that you have that particular skill set through your cover letter.
I think one thing that I might want to add to this, and it's not specific to the question, but I think it is still relevant, is, and this kind of came out in the chat, is planning is a very small world. And so how you conduct yourself really matters, because we all talk to each other. We all have our own networks. And if we have a bad experience with someone, it can have a knock-on effect down the road that, people will ask about you, even if it's indirect. And so, even if you have a bad experience with the job, you make sure you want to leave that with a good, leaving a good taste in people's mouths, I guess, for lack of a better term here. But like, try to maintain good relationships as far as you go, and try not to just phone anything in, because that kind of thing, it will follow you around outside of just the application that you have. Even if you have a job that isn't a good fit, try to do your best there, and even if you decide to step away, try to end on good terms, because that will have a big impact for your future career trajectory and opportunities.
I think
Wonderful.
one thing I love to see on resumes or cover letters is a little bit about you and your hobbies. So, especially in our context, being rural and remote, I want to understand what about this region you're excited for, and not just in terms of the work, but those other pieces that are maybe going to show that you may be inclined to stay for longer than a year or two, this may be somewhere that you could just see yourself, maybe settling down some roots. And so it's always good when you kind of share a little bit more about yourself and your interests so we can kind of get to know you through the cover letter as well.
Thank you so much, everyone. We only have about 10 minutes left, but I just want to address something that I'm seeing in the chat a bit about kind of international, people with international experience or degrees or out of province experience and degrees. So I was wondering if you have any specific advice. I know that a lot of the advice will apply to that, like applying to smaller municipalities and things like that, but do you have any specific advice for people that might be looking to move to BC from out of province or out of the country?
So have hired people from out of province, have hired people from out of country. First and foremost, you need to have your legal permissions to work in Canada in place. As a potential employer, I am not actually able to help you with that. So you need to have that part sorted out before you apply, because that will be one of the screening questions, at least for local government. Secondly, I love to see experience from different places. And what I'm particularly looking for when I see that experience is that you have enough knowledge of the Canadian planning practice or the Canadian planning environment and our legal framework that you can translate the awesome experience that you have from somewhere else into this environment to demonstrate to me that I'm not going to need to potentially teach you everything there is to know about planning. So if you are coming from outside of BC, you should probably take a look at like the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, which are the two big pieces of legislation that govern not only how local government behaves, but also really specifically to the tools that we have available as planners in this province. So if you can kind of work that in as to you have a basic understanding of what's the difference between a regional growth strategy and OCP and a zoning bylaw, and how do variances and development permits work? You can answer those questions in an elevator pitch, which is under 2 minutes. You are probably going to be somebody that I would be interested in having some conversation with. And I want to be really clear, like I have planners with training from around the world, and not all of them have accredited degrees. Several of them have gone through the PLAR process with the Planning Standards Board most successfully, and they are some of my most valued team members because they bring a really a broad perspective and a different perspective to the work that we do. I'm not looking for people who are all thinking and behaving the exact same way. I actually really enjoy having that breadth of experience, breadth of knowledge represented on the team that I'm creating, and all of that experience is incredibly valuable. I would also say this is for those of you who have that international experience, it's also an opportunity to highlight what language skills do you have that might be useful for that particular employer. You know, like I would give eye teeth for folks who speak Mandarin, Cantonese, or Punjabi as part of my team, because that is actually a really growing part of the community that I serve. So being able to offer at least a basic level of service in other languages, you know, that's a superstar skill that helps you stand out in terms of your resume and cover letter. So just kind of putting that out there as a way of saying, don't count yourself out because you don't have a Canadian degree, but make sure that you're able to translate your experience into this particular context.
I think I can add to that too. I think Lindsay did a really good job of summarizing a lot of the key points. I can speak from my own experience. So, you know, I grew up in BC, went to Ontario, worked there for 7 years, and came back and went to school with a number of folks who also did the same thing. And I know how hard it is to get back in, even when you have an existing network here, because the provinces across Canada with their different provincial frameworks are quite insular when it comes to the practice. And the knee-jerk reaction is to go towards applicants who have that experience, unfortunately. And so I think to Lindsay's point, I think Oleg kind of touched on this as well with one of his previous responses, you need to be able to demonstrate that you understand how the game is played here, particularly some of the contemporary changes. So like if I'm looking for a planning applicant coming in right now, echoing what Lindsay said, I mean, some of my best applicants have been someone who went to the University of Singapore and incredible planner. But the way that she really sold us in the original interview was that like she was talking about the changes that happened with Bill 44, 46, and 47 with the legislative change by the province and how it was going to change the Local Government Act. And she provided some thoughts on how that would affect practice. Doing that kind of research, talking to people in the industry, just understanding what's going on in the practice and how it's affecting their work and being able to communicate that goes a long way. And you can highlight that in your resume. You'll definitely have a more opportunity to highlight that in your cover letter, and just having a chance to, it is tough to do cold calls, but working through like student organizations or other industry groups to build the network as best you can if you're boots on the ground here already, that goes a long way to build that nascent or that fledgling network here, because that does also help you support and break in, because it can be tough and it can take time, but it is doable.
Yeah, and I would suggest that it doesn't hurt to try and contact their I'm sure Adam would probably take a phone call after 5 or 6 o'clock. He's probably still in the office, as the rest of us are. If you're serious about, getting a job in this field and you want to start with, in our case, a private sector. I know lots of planners within local governments that are more than happy to talk to people that are looking for work as well, and to help them with the things that they're working on, so they have a better sense of what's going on in our environment. And I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who don't just want a job; they want to build a career. They want to help the firm that the office that they're joining to be successful. So I would encourage that sort of forward thinking, if you will.
Thank you so much for all of Lindsay, do you have, we're almost at time. Do you have one last thing to add?
Yeah, I have a couple sort of last thoughts. First and foremost is don't be afraid to apply for the temporary or the auxiliary positions. So Saanich has actually 5, I think, auxiliary positions in the planning department, ranging from a planning analyst 1 all the way up to a senior planner. And those folks are basically our on-call planners. And the vast majority of our permanent positions recently have ended up being filled by those folks who are part of our auxiliary ranks. And that is actually Saanich's superpower right now, is our auxiliary planners and our ability to pivot really quickly to a wide range of projects, because we have folks with fantastic experience, skills, knowledge, and it's also an opportunity for you to learn and grow. So don't be afraid to take those positions. And some of the time can be remote, some of it can be in person, but it's all really valuable experience. Don't be afraid to move. That's the other piece. And I've been following the chat, and I'm seeing some folks who are obviously tied to particular geographies. So this is a matter of, can you perhaps move for a short period of time just to get that initial experience, so that once you are so that you then have more options that open up to you. Third, I'm also seeing some folks saying, like, I've been applying, and I'm not even getting interviews. That suggests to me that maybe you need to invest a little bit in having a professional take a look at your resume and redo it, and or potentially take a look at your cover letter too, to see if there's some tips and tricks. Learning how to write your cover letter to target the keywords that are in the job description is a unique skill set all on its own, and it is one that you don't naturally have. So that's a yeah, it might cost you a few $100 to do, but it's probably money really well spent if it then means that you can start to actually land the interviews. And then finally, planning is a field of connection. It's a field of relationships. And my first job actually arose out of me attending the Planning Institute of BC conference in Nanaimo in 1999. And I was a broke student and I stayed at the youth hostel downtown, which was sketchy as heck. And out of that experience, though, I did land my first planning job at the RDN. And I see Anna nodding because she's heard this story before. And actually, I was in a room with another young planner, Heiko Schmidt, who's now with the provincial government on regional growth strategies. She had the bunk bed above mine. She and I acted as each other's wing women for the conference. Very clear. She was looking for private sector work. I was looking for public sector work. By the end of that conference, we'd talk to everyone there. And it was a great opportunity to get to know the planning world and to find out more about what was happening in all sorts of communities around the province. So that PIBC conference that's coming up in Penticton, I highly recommend attending that or the CIP conference in Montreal if your funds will support that. But that is a great opportunity to get to know people and to make those critical connections in the profession.
Recognizing we're almost out of time too, I want to add to that, recognizing that the conferences can be quite expensive. There are also a lot of opportunities to get involved with smaller events. PIBC does a ton of walking tours, South Coast chapter, for example. Great opportunity to meet practitioners and folks that are very knowledgeable. I'm going to plug myself here because we have our social networking event coming up at the Pint on March 7th. It's a trivia night hosted alongside ITE Transportation Engineers. Great opportunity to flex your trivia muscles and get to meet some people as well too. So events like that, great opportunity to build that network that you may not otherwise have.
Or take one of Eric Adernach's courses. There you go.
Excellent. Well, I think with that, we are at time, but I mean, that was really excellent, really insightful to the point that I might start polishing my resume and leave academia and go back into practice with all these really excellent tips from our panelists. So thank you so much to Lindsay, Ashley, Sam, Adam, and Oleg for taking time out of your days to share your experiences and insights with all of us. And my thanks to Emma and Anna for leading us through the discussion. And thanks to all of you for making time to join us. We host these events and hope that people will show up, and you did, and we really appreciate you making time for us today. So thank you so much to everyone, and we'll see you next time at our next webinar. Take care.